Beardos.
So, hello, Mr. Christopher.
Hello.
So, Chris, today, this is like our second episode of Beardos, just to give some background.
All right.
The whole idea of Beardos, I'll go really quickly through it, is we want to start off like investigate the in-betweens, or rather the conflicts where technology meets creativity.
Very nice.
And how that those two dynamics kind of thing converge and push back against they exist in tension, right?
Yeah.
They exist in tension. And the tension sometimes is a little bit is frustrating for us as creators, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it does push us, especially if managed well, towards the correct answer.
100%.
So you are, I would say, let me ask the question. What would you characterize yourself as?
A creative director. Yeah.
Sure.
I'll go with that. That's one of many titles I've held, but we'll go with creative director as the current one.
Very good, very good. And your area of operations right now is?
Video games.
Very good.
So I work in the video game industry.
Yes, yes. So if you had to first and foremost kind of like say, like my shiniest sort of like talent, or where I feel most comfortable explaining things to myself, is where? Is it the drawing, the writing, the mechanics?
It's more of a unicorny kind of place of being very good at the organizational with the creative. So what I actually find what I do best is I am able to bring out the best of other creatives and then also keep them on schedule.
Yeah, that whole chestnut. Okay, so from a creative point of view, where do you shine? Because
from a creative standpoint, narrative.
Yeah.
It's really where I spend a lot of my time and focus is in narrative and story creation.
Yeah. So
yeah.
you play with words, right?
That's true. Play on Word Studios. So yeah, we're you know. That's their thing.
The one thing I'm trying to sort of like tease out is if you are primarily a words guy kind of thing, like I would consider myself to be primarily
drawing guy.
Not drawing really, like it's just like
smudging.
Yeah. It's like trying
sketching and stuff. Getting ideas down.
Yes,
right?
exactly. Like visually explaining to myself where I need this to be, kind of thing. Or rather, where I need this not to be most of the time.
Fair enough.
I am quite interested to know what the process of like a writer, so to speak. I will use the word writer very loosely, but I think it fits.
As long as you don't use wordsmith, we're fine.
Oh, very good. No, like how does a writer translate their vision first and foremost as a concept, right? So it becomes words. The words make an internal sort of like, hopefully a structured sort of like, a structured whole. And then it gets translated into, in the case of video games, mechanics, the actual narrative being portrayed, graphics, the visual layer. So that process is quite interesting to me, if you could.
Sure. So yeah, I mean, most ideas start, for me, just coming out of nowhere, right? Like I do a lot of meditation, I do a lot of walking and thoughts, and they just kind of come to me, and I'm always kind of taking notes of where and what I'm thinking of, and when some cool idea comes about, I always make sure, and I use a lot of tools for this, right? I have some kind of notation device, I record my voice, I write down whatever the case might be, I put it down, and I come back to it, and I let it stew for a little bit, right? I really feel the creative process is not something that you put a quarter into the gumball machine, you turn the thing, you get the gumball, right? I mean, there are ways, I think, to be creative and structured and produce creativity on it, but I think real creativity, really hitting your muse and so forth, right? That takes time to really think and gel over an idea for a period of time, and then make sure you take those moments when they come of clarity of like, oh, this is what we need to do, write it down, and then structure it. So, and I mentioned structure just because I do think that there are processes and ways of doing things that can produce, especially in a video game, right? So you have like what's called a game design document, right? It's a living, breathing document that's never really ever complete, that you're always kind of just reworking and writing in and structuring and organizing so that your vision, whether it's a narrative vision, whether it's the creative, the design of the game, is communicated to the rest of the team, right? As a game designer, and that's where I'll put a lot of it in the creative director, you have to be able to communicate to your team what you want, right? What's in your noggin, what's there, and make sure it gets, because if you don't create clarity in your GDD, people will be making a game, it just won't be your game.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And so when you're writing, I always tell game designers and people, it's just communication is your most important tool, and you have to know how to communicate to other people, and you have to know how they receive information, right? So if you have a game developer who's programming, they might want their information in a certain way. If you have an artist you're working with, they're going to want the information presented in a different way.
They might not even be listening to the way, like you're saying the words, and the words get interpreted
totally differently, right?
Like different lenses.
And so I always say you present the information in multiple layers, right?
Yes.
Like I like to start with the high level, which is like a sentence of like, what is it? What are we trying to do? And then a mid-level, which is somebody who might be working in the project. They can read, or it could be pictures, or whatever the case might be, and absorb like, okay, this is what needs to go in. And then a more lower level, high detailed piece that's like charts, flow charts, mechanics, so forth, like highly, for whoever's going to actually implement into it, right? Because basically my job, I find, is I make a lot of work for other people.
Yeah, but you're the context. You're the context builder, right? Just to tease out, because you had a couple of really interesting sort of like nuggets there. The difference between the creativity on tap, which is expected in a professional setting, kind of thing. Like you'd expect a person. So let's say you are my video game creator, and I come to you and I say, I need you to give me something that looks roughly like a video game with this kind of vibe, right? You should be, on some level, able to sort of like bring forward some sort of idea. Now, no one expects the quintessential GDD there and then,
no, of course not.
Right? Or it's an unrealistic expectation. But this speaks to the tension we mentioned before. So your ability to creatively tap into the space of possibility to tease out and bring out and make manifest an IP or an object kind of thing. That's, let's call it, that's what's expected. That's the production layer kind of thing. And one spending enough time in that world will learn little shortcuts and structure.
I could tell you one right now.
Please.
Yeah. So one way of doing it, and this also comes with experience, right? Like, but it's creating a one sheet, right?
Yes.
So instead of writing a full GDD or even a full pitch document or anything like that, it's just a one sheet, right? And with the one sheet, I usually just have my elevator pitch, right? So like, or I call it now the coffee line pitch, right? If I was in line with somebody and I ran into them and they were a producer or a publisher or whatever, and I had between getting in line to them ordering their coffee, just being able to tell them something to make them go, cool, here's my card, or give me your card, or contact info, right, and follow up. But the one sheet starts with just the elevator pitch. Then it's an overview, 2 paragraphs to kind of overview what the game is about, where it's going to take place, the genre, this and that, and then 6 bullet points. What we used to call the back of the box, but since people don't buy physical copies that much anymore, back of the box used to be for those that are very young. On the back of a video game, when you would buy it, you would read the back of the box and it would tell you the features that would be in the game itself. Now I would call it the Steam page. If you went to the Steam page and you had the features that are there, this is what you would look at, right? So there would be those. And the way people actually read a one sheet is they don't read the elevator pitch, then the overview, then the bullet points. They'll read the elevator pitch. If that hooks them, then they'll read the bullet points, because it's bullet points, it's easier for them to read. And if they like that, they'll read the overview. And the overview, and that's just the way people read it. But I find that saves you a lot of time. I can put together a one sheet super quick. But I also have a lot of experience, not just pitching new IP, but also working in biz dev, business development. That's a good word. To get clients, and we would have people who from like all shoemakers and plastic toy makers or whatever, and we'd have to like come up with an idea of like, this will sell your product in the video game, and they'd be like, why do I need digital horses? And you're like, you do. You do. And well, you did like 10 years ago. If you haven't caught on yet now, you're a little behind. But this was 25 years in the industry doing that, right? So these one sheets that were great because you could send it over and really quick get a response and be somebody like, yeah, that sounds great. I want to know more, right? Okay, cool. You send like 3 or 4 of those, and you kind of get them to go like, I like this, I like this, I like this. And like, I used to work in special effects makeup, and when we would present like makeup designs and so forth, we would put 3 in front of a director or whatever, and they would circle the things that they like, right? And it's the same thing with the one sheets. You give them a couple different ideas, and they go, I like that, and I like that, and I like that. And then you go, okay, cool, and you come back and you throw them together, and you go, you like that? And I go, yes. And then it's like, it just speeds up your process.
Yeah. So again, like a very sort of like loaded with information. So I don't want to lose a particular thread which you mentioned before, which speaks to meditation and growing the sort of like pool of ideas, so to speak. That's sort of like tending the garden, so to speak. That's the way I kind of conceptualize it. But also, like this first of all, this very shrewd understanding that people read in terms of the smallest nugget of information. So there's like
people don't read. Is the problem.
Yeah.
So.
Or they read and do not parse, which is probably like
that's another thing too. Yeah.
So like I would say that like to echo your point and find myself very much nodding vigorously. At least at the existential level, people do not, they look for the least amount of effort that will give them the most amount of picture, even if it's a complete misunderstanding. The attitude is
that's just a human thing.
Yeah.
There's a lot to human. The reason conspiracies exist, right? The mind likes to not work, and so it takes one piece of information and another and tries to make it. No matter how far away they could be in concept, and make a connection between the two. It's just like
our beards are an illusion.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, so like that's very real, and that kind of, I would say that the same kind of attribute informs the creative process as well, because sometimes you'll go off an intuition, like you very well mentioned before, and then it kind of you kind of start to you're building some context out of no context.
Sure.
And then you start reacting to that, and you start finding the internal logic of whatever idea you have there, kind of thing. And well, sometimes it leads nowhere, and sometimes you just need to let it stew and like let it materialize in your head. So from a practical standpoint, I do believe that's very much on the money. Now, let's talk about the other side, which is like the well, the garden. When you go for a walk, when you meditate, are you thinking actively about stuff, or are you just watching yourself looking at what comes to your head?
I mean, well, both meditate. It's just what comes. I let thoughts come. So there's a misconception that meditation is about clearing your mind. And the reality is that it's hard to do that. I mean, you can, that is part of it, but really you're just letting the ideas come, and then you let them stay for as long as they need to, and then you let them pass. But when you're looking for from a creative standpoint, sometimes you want them to stay a little bit longer so you can think through them and everything like that. But yeah, that's generally how it goes for me. Is I'm just letting the thoughts come, and then I think about them or whatever. You know, a lot of ideas sometimes come from hearing a song randomly when you're walking around. You hear, oh, that would be brilliant. We can do that with the thing, and then like.
So, like a little catalyst will push you in a direction, and you're smart enough to follow that thought through. Sometimes it leads somewhere, sometimes it doesn't. Is it? How much of a practice is it? What I mean is it something you do once a week, like Clockwork, or is it something that you kind of like? There's ebbs and flows.
Oh no, it's so I'll give a little bit more background. So I grew up with a mom who was a New Age hippie, and so so I grew up in a comic book store, and I grew up with my father, and then my mother was a New Age hippie. So she actually taught me to meditate at like 5 years old. So I've been meditating for a very long time. I went very deep in my 20s into other forms like Tai Chi, yoga, Qigong, transcendental meditation, lots of other forms. And so for me, yoga used to be a daily practice. Obviously not anymore.
It's like, didn't see that one coming.
But meditation's a daily practice for me. And so every morning I wake up, I do 30 minutes to an hour worth of meditation. Throughout my day, I do breath work. I take walks, again, not as often as I should, to also clear my mind and get things. So it's pretty, I wouldn't say regimented, because again, I still let it flow or whatever, but it's a daily practice for me.
Yeah.
So.
I think it's regimented by it's learned the regimentation kind of thing.
Sure.
It's like you've made space for it for so long that you do it automatically.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And again, I find myself nodding vigorously in assent kind of thing, that I do believe that like some sort of meditative practice. Now, meditative practice, I like to enlarge the scope of what I mean by it, at least. Like playing music, for example, especially when you need to tap into a kind of flow state.
Flow state, exactly, the same thing. So there's a lot of athletes who, I had a conversation recently with an athlete who was like, I run. And I was like, there you go, flow state, right? You do that. I used to sculpt, because again, I used to be a special effects makeup artist, so I used to sculpt things. Sculpting for me, clay, so with clay is very meditative, right? So there's a lot of different ways to reach a meditative state. Can be writing. I know people that program and code, like they get into a state where they're just, flowing, doing their work and everything like that.
So. I think that's probably the one of, I don't mean it's common in that sense, but I think when you watch a person coding, especially if you're interrupting their work, for example.
Don't do it.
Oh, but sometimes you need to, because
still don't do it.
We had agreed this was going to take like 10 minutes, and what I need is a yes or no, and this has been 5 hours in now. So maybe like a little friendly poke. Yeah, so about the gallery we were designing. No, it's something else now. No, but I do. Because there is so much, it's such an exercise in abstraction, right? So you're breaking down the whatever logic you're trying to get to, kind of thing. You're translating it into this sort of like very peculiar looking language, but it is a language. So you are speaking, you are authoring, right? And I do believe that it kind of exemplifies the best parts of like the more embodied practice, which is like running, sculpting, kind of thing, walking, all of that kind of stuff, and also the sort of like more introspective experience of actually meditating and looking at your thought and consider like taking a step away from that.
Be the observer.
Yeah, be the observer, exactly. I do think that coding specifically lives in that space closer to anything else. It feels like in the Venn diagram of traditional meditation and flow state, coding hits the Venn diagram squarely in the middle, kind of thing. That's my observation, but could be completely wrong.
So the current project is Shadow City Mysteries, Clockwork Noir. So think Blade Runner by way of Lovecraft Country, set in a Frank Miller Sin City kind of world with a New Game Plus twist. That's the elevator pitch. And then so it's being done in Unreal, and it's intended to be on PC and consoles. So all these things need to be taken into consideration, right? Like who's our target audience, right? So we're looking at 25 to 35-year-olds, which means that we're not aiming it at myself, which is and then those kind of pieces. And so the idea is you start with that one sheet and you get your different features in there, right? So when we say Frank Miller Sin City, we're talking about monochromatic with punches of color, but instead of color, we're using metallics to kind of set the mood in the world itself. The reference to Blade Runner is kind of for the noirish aspect, because it's a Clockwork Noir. Again, playing on the fact that there's some technology, but it's a little bit different from our own known world. And then the reference to Lovecraft Country is to basically say that there's supernatural elements to the world that are there too. And then we call out that there's a New Game Plus twist, and people were like, wait, it's a narrative adventure game. How do you do a New Game Plus? Well, we changed the story. So our game is actually intended to be played 3 times. And so the first time you play, it's a mystery. Second time, it's a conspiracy. And the third time, it's a supernatural thriller. And so we have a lot of layers to all that. So then that one sheet, which we had when we put together, and then we moved it into a pitch document that we used to sell it to investors and publishers. We then also move into a GDD, right? So all those things that are listed, right? You have your elevator pitch, You have your overview, which talks about the game. All these pieces basically aren't wasted. They're reused and put into your GDD, and then you expand upon them, right? Like you blow it out to kind of start working out on all those different things.
So at some point, you had the idea of whatever this universe is, or did you have like the format? Because like marrying the format and the thing.
It was the format for it. So, originally this was a thought thesis of on production, actually, not on the creative side. So the thought process always is how do we create more content without creating more content? Or how do we allow the player to see or experience something more, but from the production side, not create a million things that nobody's going to actually see or interact with. And so that was the tell 3 stories, basically using the same NPCs in the same locations, mostly, and then how do you reframe it and so forth. The theme and everything else is kind of like, we actually have a number. So as a company, as Play on Words Studios, our goal is basically to be known for this format. And so we have a number of different IPs and brands besides the Noir one that we're working on right now that can be framed and done in the same way. It's just the first one we're doing is Noir. And the main reason we're doing Noir is because I thought it'd be cool to do black and white. And also it's kind of like a tribute to my father. So my father was really big in the serials and old stories and mysteries and gumshoes and all everything from back old movies and stuff like that. Grew up with it. Grew up with, you know, obviously in a comic book store, as I mentioned. So that was just everywhere. And so basically playing on that, but doing it with again like a twist, right? We always want to do a twist. A big thing for us is being as inclusive as possible. So you know, our characters are a little bit different than your traditional gumshoe, forth. And I think when more and more characters come out, you'll see a lot more representation and stuff in the world itself.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's an interesting. Well, first of all, I would say that like having porting something that worked, let's say 60 years ago, the global context has changed, and therefore, like the new stories can be told using older formats, right? And like I think probably everyone who exists within this sort of space understands that there are like different forces at play. You know, like they've got the people who are on one extreme shouting, and then you've got the other people on the other extreme still shouting. Like you guys maybe should get a life. And like so like it's the people in the middle that kind of like, okay, no, this is an actual consideration. And my set of sensibilities versus your set of sensibilities will automatically be different enough. And if one has a degree of trust, and I would say the right word there is faith, right? That if you follow your muse and you know yourself to be a reasonably stand-up person, the decisions you will make downstream of that will probably be the right ones, and you're smart enough to say, no, maybe not.
I think you bring in the right people too. Right?
No,
like you check yourself.
Right?
Before you wreck yourself, as they used to say. No, 100% that. But I mean, again, the setting itself though is you know, it's sort of like a Casablanca kind of city, right? Where there's all these different groups and organizations that are working for their own means, but in the background there's a very, you know, fascist government that's at work. And so I mean, there's all those tones, and then you're, you know, just a detective trying to do the best you can, down your luck, get sucked into this because, you know, you need the work, and then it goes from one crazy thing to another, and then, you know, so.
It's also like to maybe focus a little bit on the idea that you want to, correct me if I'm wrong, you kind of want to make sure that you're squeezing as much leverage as you can of any content that's created. So there's like a kind of like economy.
There's economy to every decision, right? I think having worked in the video game industry a lot, I've seen a lot of waste. I've seen a lot of folks that don't take fiscal responsibility. And I'll even say, we talk about technology too, right? Like don't understand the limitations, or that anything, I used to say this, anything can be done, right? Given enough time, money, and resources, anything can be done, right? I used to have bosses that would come to me and they'd be like, Chris, can we do this? I'm like, sure. Well, not just, I mean, we get the right people, we get the right whatever, right? But again, going back to the thesis of this is it's looking at how do we monetarily come from this as a smart, how do we make a game that looks amazing and has a high quality but costs 1/10 of what it does, right? How do you do that? And I have a lot of conversations with investors and so forth about this, and they all question because they're like, I've got people coming to me for 20 times the budget you're asking for. How are you going to pull it off? And then I show them the plan, and they go, oh, that's like, again, there's a plan. Have a plan, right?
You're not just like
no,
right?
no, but you do see a lot of. I mean, again, I work with a lot of. Part of my other work, besides I consult with a lot of startups and other companies in the video game industry, and they don't know. You don't know what you don't know a lot, right? A lot of it comes with experience, but a lot of it could just be done with a lot more planning and putting in the things, right? And we go back to, I just want to go back to the limitation thing. I think a really important thing and where it brings out creativity is whenever I used to work with my teams, and I still work with my teams, I know personally what the limits are for my team, but I never let them, I let them think as crazy out of the box as they want to at first. And then we reel them in with the limitations,
but you let them go out.
I let them go outside,
exactly,
100%, right? Like, 'cause I don't want them to worry about that, but I do worry about it. And somebody has to. The problem is I see like people are just like, oh, well, they'll pay for that, or oh, we don't worry about that, or oh, it doesn't matter about that. And it's like, it does, guys. Everything adds up. Everything has a cost. You have to look. The sad thing is I don't think enough creatives think about the business. And I know it's a dirty word.
It's considered the dirty word.
It's a dirty business, dirty word. But and you know, I said unicorn earlier. It's just one of those things is that I love being creative, and but I also love the limitations that. Well, okay, I don't love limitations budgets when like no budget causes, but I like the limitations that reasonable budgets and reasonable like technological things cause, because it actually forces me to be more creative, kind of what we alluded to, right? You have to, how do I overcome this, or how do I approach this in a way that still conveys my message, my story, what I'm trying to, again, coming from a special effects background, like, you know, practical effects, not, you know, visual effects, like, we'd have to figure out, like, how do you cheat a shot? How do you, like, like, how do I make, you know, there was a lot, there's nothing wrong with visual effects that can show me all the gore and everything, like, but there was something to practical effects, like a monster claw coming down and then a cut, and then you see the face is like this, and your mind actually has a lot, but like, we had to figure that out, right? Like, we're like, oh, how do we do this? Convey as much of the story as possible without, you know, missing out on something. So.
Yeah, and like to your point, because you have sort of like, because you have put forward this idea that you want to do, squeeze the content, so to speak. That led you down a very interesting part of the transmedia path, right? Which is that's, I guess, how we met originally, right? You came along for some motion capture stuff, kind of thing, and motion capture kind of speaks to that kind of let's iterate quickly. It doesn't need to be perfect. We'll clean it up later. It still gets you 80%, 90% there. If you're really smart, you can just use as is. You need to be smart.
You need to be smart, though, right? And you have to plan it out, right?
That's kind of the point, because the moment you start, the moment the technology starts playfully pushing back, and sometimes the technology doesn't playfully push back. It just says, fuck you, which is the nature of the game, right? Also, that usually means you're making the wrong decision. Yeah,
I mean, I think you're making a painful decision. Yeah. I mean, again, some people don't learn, and they're going to do it no matter what, and I've seen it. And you get some amazing results if you push. Don't get me wrong, like, sometimes you can.
Yes. You need to be smart enough to understand how much pushing does this particular moment require. Right? So, like, the attitude of minimum necessary force, but having a clear goal, right? So, like, this might still mean you're pulling teeth for 9 months, but that's what needs to happen, kind of thing. So yeah, I do believe that, like, with the attitude of trying to be a little bit more economic without economic, even if it's just effort, the required effort, is a very good guiding principle.
Sure.
Because the moment you've got something starting to materialize, you've got more context to make the call, oh, maybe we need to spend a little bit more time rendering that.
Yeah.
Maybe we need to have another shoot kind of thing.
I think going forward, especially for indie companies and just in game companies, you need to be looking at transmedia.
Yeah.
I think don't get me wrong, you put maybe it is smarter. Especially if it's your first game, yeah, 100%. Don't try and do like a million things. Do like one thing that you're really laser focused. But also, if it's your first game, don't make your dream game your first game. Yeah. But I see one of the other reasons for why we're doing what we're doing with transmedia is because I see companies that I feel missed out on the zeitgeist of the popularity of their game or to be on other platforms. And yeah, they reach it eventually and they are still kind of popular or whatever. But I feel they lost basically money on the table right? Like they'd had that ready when that was popular for when people wanted more of that thing instead of having to wait 10 years for an anime. For a game that's super popular, it was super popular for years. And don't get me wrong, like again, everybody does it. But if you plan for it, also like I think it helps mitigate your risk a little bit. I mean, to a degree, right? If you have a really bad idea, you have a bad idea, right? But if you have if you've tested it out and you've done a little bit of marketing and checked to see like whether or not there's any kind of resonance for your idea or what you're creating, and there is, why wouldn't you maximize that as much as possible, right?
Of course. So your contention is that if you had to just make some space at the beginning during the design phase kind of thing to actually prospect out, okay, so if this is a success, we should probably do this, and do this kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, you always have the option of not pursuing it, right? If it's not something you've ever, like I've worked in film, television, video games, print marketing, so forth, right? So I've touched on a lot of different aspects of transmedia that we're focusing on, and all of our focus on transmedia is all narrative based, right? We're not talking about plushies and T-shirts and things like that. I mean, we will, but that's not our focus, right? We're looking at where we can basically take an IP and a brand that we've designed and take the empty space that exists from one product and then fill it a little bit with some more story and so forth, right? Just to create more of that interest. And the thing is that we're approaching it from, and I think this is an important thing to say, is that all of our transmedia we're looking at as marketing, right? So it's a marketing spend, which even if you were doing that one game where all your focus was in the game and that whole budget, technically you would still have to be doing marketing, or else your game will not do well without marketing.
So the biggest difference there would be that like marketing is more of like a targeted approach to popularizing your IP versus maybe it's a better way of
We have the potential of additional streams of revenue with ours, right? So if I look at anything that we're doing in transmedia as like, let's say we do some YouTube shorts, right? And they take off, we can get, YouTube money via that, right? But it also creates attention to our game and new stories and so forth. If we're doing a tabletop RPG, which we are, and you can follow us on BackerKit, the benefit there is we hit a tabletop RPG community and we get more people interested. May not be 100% one-to-one, but chances some of that will go and play our video game, right?
Even if you lift 10% out of that like excluded pool of people.
It's
10% increase.
10% increase, right?
And you're but at the same time you are still getting the 100% who back you kind of thing to do the 100% thing either way, right?
Exactly.
So they're still enjoying your content kind of thing.
They're enjoying the brand and the content and what they provide. Because that's the thing to keep in mind with transmedia is transmedia isn't always about it's about finding the right media to tell the story and doing it properly, and realize that you're going to be targeting only a percentage of your audience, right? And not the entirety of your audience, right? But it gives exposure to new people to your IP and brand if it's exciting and something cool that they're interested in, and then it gives your major fans more opportunities to explore and enjoy the world, right?
That's very interesting. So I would just because we mentioned it in passing, and I do think that if there's any sort of upcoming young creatives looking at this, you said consider the business.
Yeah.
Make the business a creative problem is probably the way I would put it, right? So enjoy fixing the business side as well. Making a profit is not,
No, it should not be your driver,
but it's also not dirty, right?
It's not a bad thing. No, definitely not a bad thing. There's a couple of things when I talk with new teams and they're doing their work and they're trying to figure out like, should we even be doing this or whatever? The only two things that I think need to be lockstep with each other needs to be your production plan and your business plan, right? Right. Those two things need to be coinciding with each other, and whatever you're doing in production needs to match up with whatever's being done on the business side as far as costing and so forth. Yeah. Then you have your biz dev, and then you have your marketing. Those marketing and business development should never drive your production. They should never drive your financials. Your financials should always be driving those pieces, right? And that's the thing I would say to anybody new is like, again, when we look at anything, going back to how we tie in pieces together, is we have our production plan and we know what we're delivering on, and we're able to use different assets and so forth to help supply our marketing efforts.
Very good.
Right?
Very good. Yes.
And so
that's a very practical way of.
So when we look at the tabletop RPG and we look at the art that we're doing there and the world creation, we're already creating that for our video game. So now we're just basically adding in another layer. That we're able to bring out and have people
do they feed back into each other? So like, for example, you're building the tabletop RPG. Let's say a particularly interesting mechanic, you stumble upon an interesting tabletop RPG mechanic kind of thing. And you say, this is kind of cool. Even this little piece of artwork, we need to create this little piece of, do you make the allowance that that thing can make it back?
Oh, 100%. You have to. You have to give, I mean, again, you open everything attached to nothing. You have to at least be reasonable in what you're taking on and getting, right? So we're looking at, we're going to be doing a series of visual novels that are focused on, so again, still video game, but a different style of video game, right? More 2D. So we're able to reuse some of our fantastic concept art that's going to be done again for the tabletop RPG, but then we'll be able to use some more for the visual novel. And we're able to tell stories about 6 of the significant characters within the world pre the video game. So again, like giving you like a background into these characters.
You're doing world building by proxy.
And then from there, the idea is that major decisions you make in those feed into the full video game itself too, right? So
very cool, sir. This was illuminating, to say the least. Hopefully people who have watched this have taken something out of it, and thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Beardos.